Hello and welcome to this Legal 500 webinar in partnership with Lawyers for Net Zero. The topic of the day is Finance and Net Zero, the GC's view, the in-house legal perspective on how finance can help deliver rapid climate action. As you might be able to tell from our background here, we are in fact live at COP26 in Glasgow. We are stationed in the green zone. It is Finance Day today. So what better place to be able to present you this discussion today. Many thanks to our audience for signing up, registering and tuning in such large numbers today. Thanks for Adam Woodhall, who will be co-moderating this webinar with me today, from Lawyers for Net Zero, and who made it possible for us to be here at COP26 today. Thank you, of course, also to our speakers, who will also introduce themselves in a moment's time. Just a quick note about myself. My name is Anna Baubeck. I'm here on behalf of the Legal 500. I've been working for the Legal 500 since 2012 and have been focusing largely on the German legal market as Deutschland editor, but more relevant for today, I've also been involved in the development of a brand new product, the Global Green Guide. We in fact launched our Green Guide Hub on the Legal 500 website yesterday, so do go check that out if you are interested in the legal sector's perspective and role in a green transition. Then yes, do have a look at that. It contains all sorts of content from both an in-house and private practice perspective on all things ESG, climate action, net zero, sustainability, you name it. But enough of a plug, just a quick note on the structure of today's webinar. As you registered, you will have seen that we also included a quick survey with 8 questions as part of the registration. Thank you again for the vast majority of you for filling out those questions. We are thrilled to be able to actually present you with the results as part of today's discussion. Of course, our panelists will also be sharing their views on those questions with us today. So also just a quick note about that. Of course, our esteemed panelists are all renowned GCs working for very prominent financial institutions, and as such, I think they will have some very interesting views to share with us today. But just to say that, in fact, whatever opinions they will be voicing today are, in fact, their own personal opinions and do not necessarily reflect those of the companies that they work for. Yeah, just a quick note on the structure of the webinar. We have sort of grouped the questions into 4 kind of broad topics of discussions. First, we will be speaking about the role of the GC in helping companies achieve net zero. Then we'll be sort of moving more towards a discussion about ESG reporting. Is it a reliable tool or not? Then we will look at net zero as a potential opportunity for growth. And lastly, we'll have a little discussion more generally about net zero and corporate finances. Are they at odds or maybe not? Yeah, without further ado, let me hand over to my co-moderator, Adam from Lawyers for Net Zero.
So literally, we are going to be passing the baton between us when we're doing this. That wasn't quite the plan that we had with the technology before, but we are kind of hopefully going to be able to work with that. I know that we had a little bit of a sound issue at the start, but hopefully that's been sorted out as well. So delighted that I am working with Legal 500 on this, and that we are here live from Net Zero. And actually, I must say that I had a bit of a dream that particularly we chose this time today because it could have people join from not just Europe, but also Asia and the Americas. And what I'm so happy is that we've got Timo, who's joining us from Brazil, even though he's representing in business the European. And we've got Belinda from London, and then Andrew is joining from Singapore. So we do have a global array of GCs representing their views. As we say, think about this. This is like their Twitter feed, basically, but just a little bit less angry, probably, and a little bit more interesting, I think, than most Twitter feeds. So what is Lawyers for Net Zero? Well, we are passionate about how the legal industry, particularly in-house lawyers, can make such a difference to the net zero narrative. Because as the slide that we've got up there is representing, that at the center of that diagram, we've got in-house lawyers, and they can make such a difference for how things can be delivered. So I was really happy to work with the Legal 500 team, and there's Fred in the background who's actually been very calmly guiding us through this whole process, and he's doing the technical at the background. So don't blame him, it's our problem if we've got some problems here. And what he's worked to get these fantastic questions that we've got. So during how we're working today, I'm mainly kind of like opening this up. I will be adding some comments as we go through, but particularly because Anna's actually been the one that's been working on these questions that you, most of you answered as part of your registration process. I'm going to be handing over to Anna to do that. But I think first things we'll do is probably hand over to the speakers. So we'll start off on the Americas time zone. If we can have Timo give a quick kind of name, rank and serial number sort of introduction to yourself.
Great. Thank you very much, Adam and Anna as well. Thanks to the Legal 500 and Lawyers to Net Zero in putting it together. I'm Timo Spitzer. I'm head of legal corporate and investment banking for Germany, Austria, Switzerland, and the Nordic countries at Banco Santander. Before that, I worked for private practice for quite a number of years for a couple of law firms. And yeah, I'm very happy to support everyone here, and I hope we can contribute in making this event a success.
Thank you. And then can we have now Belinda in the middle of this global activity?
Yes, hello everybody. So I'm Belinda Ellington. I head up the legal team for commodities at Citi, and I've also been very involved in the kickoff of ESG since 2019 at Citi from a legal support perspective. And now I'm much more focused on ESG support for global markets. Previous to Citi, I was at Deutsche, where I did the same thing. I was lead for commodities legal there. And previous to that, I was in private practice. And previous to that, I wasn't a lawyer at all.
Great stuff. Okay, and then actually, because Timo, we'd forgotten to put it so that we could see you. Can you tell us which part of Brazil you're in at the moment, so everybody can see your face fully?
Well, I'm currently in Londrina, which sounds like a little London, actually, because the INA is the little, and we have actually a couple of London telephone booths, you know, the red ones, which London actually donated to Londrina. So I'm not that far away from you guys in London.
Okay, great stuff. And then we'll now use green hydrogen to jet all the way over to Singapore and join Andrew. So Andrew, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi there, Adam. Thanks for that. And thank you for setting this up and hosting this together with Legal 500. Hi, everyone. I'm Andrew Dixon Smith. I'm at Standard Chartered Bank. I lead the client coverage legal division of Standard Chartered Bank in our CCIDB division, based in Singapore, and have a regional and governance role for transactional activity across transaction banking, corporate finance, general lending, restructuring, and I do a bit of sustainable finance related work as well. So great to join you. Thank you.
Fantastic. So what now I'm going to hand over to Anna to kind of like take the baton for the next part of our section. So she is getting us back up onto our slides. There we go. And then let's hand back.
you very much, everyone, for bearing with us with the earphone swapping going on here. So yes, without further ado, let's move on to our first point of discussion, which, as announced, was the GC's role in helping companies achieve net zero. So if you did fill in our survey, you will have seen that the first two questions were: how important do you view the in-house counsel to be in helping overall corporate strategy, and how confident are you that setting net zero targets and policies is necessary? Now, we've got two very nice scatter graphs for you here, where you'll hopefully be able to kind of visualize what the answers were to those. Full disclosure, as you can see from the axis of the graph here, we've taken into account about 250 respondents here. Of course, there were in fact plenty more that registered for the webinar and also answered the survey questions after we evaluated the data, but for the purposes of this, it was about 250 responses. So I think the graphs sort of speak for themselves. As you can see, the blue dots are very much sort of clustered in the top half, or even more like where you can see the number 10 on both of those questions, which means that the vast majority of our respondents thought that yes, in fact, in-house counsel are seen as extremely important in shaping overall corporate strategies. And also, yes, the majority of you thought that setting net zero targets and policies is extremely important and necessary as well. So bearing that in mind, now over to my panelists, maybe starting with you, Belinda. Do you agree with the majority of our respondents on these results? And most importantly as well, what do you view your role as a GC to be in helping companies achieve net zero?
Thank you. Well, I suppose I'd be interested to know how many people were lawyers who answered this question. Because I imagine quite a lot of them were lawyers. I think that it very much depends on what kind of organization you're in. In a large organization, there are lots of departments that are extremely important in shaping strategy. But when we're looking specifically at this area of ESG and the drive towards net zero, there is a lot of policies, a lot of legislation. It's coming out thick and fast, and it's very important to have counsel on top of that for interpretation and applicability. But in a large organization like City, we've also got government affairs offices, we've got compliance, we've got reg reform teams, and we all work together. So it's critical that there are teams of people who understand all the facets of this, and that legal slots into that and works hand in hand. I think the other thing to think about is that we're looking at from lots of different buckets. There is the impact of the organization on the climate, so its own net zero targets. Then there's the impact of policies and legislation on that organization. And then for many of us, it's also the impact on our clients. So lawyers have different roles within large organizations, and my primary role is client facing. So it's very important that I also understand how this legislation impacts our clients, so that we can support the clients and support the business in its business development and its strategies going forward. So I think as part of a team, yes, it is very important that the lawyers are aware of the impact of this legislation coming out.
Great, thanks, Belinda. So I gather from what you were saying, obviously, as a GC, you're not going to be acting alone, but you are going to be working as a team, liaising with lots of other departments and people. But sort of as a GC, you can, in essence, become a sort of disproportionate tool in helping companies achieve these goals. Timo, maybe handing over to you. I know you've also sort of written and spoken quite extensively about sort of the elevation of the GC function. I think you say to sort of serve as a company's moral compass. Yeah, maybe what's your view on this?
Thank you very much, Anna. I absolutely agree with what Belinda has said. And I would reiterate the beautiful words spoken by my actually legal idol, Ben Heinemann, the former GC of General Electric, a lawyer must be a technical legal expert, so it starts there, but he also must be a wise counselor and an accountable leader. And I would say also a decent human being. And I think that the lawyer as a steward of the company, not only as a strategic partner to the business, but also, and more importantly, as guardian to the corporation, to oversee the due incorporation of ESG into the daily business operations would be the ideal goal. But I would submit that the lawyer has to earn this position, because if the lawyer is not a partner to the business, if he or she is not a strategic advisor, he or she will never be included into strategic decision making and thus cannot perform his role as a guardian. So I would promote lawyers being partners first in order to be fulfilling their more important guardian role better. And then when they want to share their views, their thoughts, their course direction into the general corporate strategy, they will be deserving of the seat at the decision-making table.
All right, great. And Andrew, I think you were gone for a minute in terms of your video, but I think we can see you again and hopefully hear you as well. What's your view on your role in helping achieve net zero goals?
Yeah, I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Good. So I'd agree with Belinda. It is a team effort, and I'd agree with Timo. You do need to be a partner and earn that respect to be able to be a partner credibly. I also would say that it's all lawyers and not just GCs or senior lawyers. It's all lawyers, because sustainable finance is all pervasive, and achieving the net zero goals requires everyone to step up, quite frankly. There are huge risks and huge opportunities in financing net zero. And in financial services, lawyers play a critical role. And in the context of sustainable finance and transition finance, I think they're important in catalyzing and ensuring risks are appropriately covered, and indeed ensuring banks provide sustainable finance and transition finance in an appropriate way. So I think it's pretty fundamental that lawyers are at the table. There is a need, I think, for financial industry lawyers to be involved as banks move from sort of commitment to action, and lawyers need to be involved in accelerating that action. And ESG values are being embedded across the financial institutions' end-to-end framework. And so it's going to require lawyers to be involved in that, because it's a re-engineering of how our banks operate to some extent in relation to meeting some of these objectives. So yeah, I think lawyers play a key role in facilitating the process and in some aspects leading that adoption.
Great, thank you, Andrew. So I think for the sake of keeping with our tight time schedule, let's get down to some of the more nitty-gritty ESG reporting. So another question our survey was, do you find ESG reporting to be a trusted and reliable tool in helping companies meet the goals for 2030 and 2050? Now, in stark contrast to the first two graphs that you saw, this one actually, you can see the answers were much more diverse. So, you know, while quite a few of the dots are clustered sort of in the top half, it's still, a relatively wide variety of answers there. So some people do believe that ESG reporting is a reliable tool and others not so much. So I'd be very interested to hear from our panelists what your view on this is. Maybe Timo, starting with you this time. I know you've also sort of been quite engaged with the notion of ESG color washing, which probably plays into this. So yeah, I'll pass over to you to
Thank you very much, Anna. Indeed, and also thanks for featuring me in your Global Green Guide, which went live yesterday. I will share a link after this seminar to the guide, where we further explore the notion of color washing. But let's talk about positive things first. So ESG principles and the implementation of business is an integral part of corporate strategy nowadays. and it must be taken seriously. But it has gone on from being a pure marketing efforts to being a legal obligation of any company which is submitted to the ESG disclosure rules. And here actually companies can no longer use this as a tick the box exercise with lofty corporate statements, but have actually to answer to the regulators on the metrics they actually use for the ESG implementations. And then the regulator will hold them accountable for doing so. We also already see lawsuits in this respect. You know, the Heathrow expansion didn't go through at one point because of, you know, violation of points in the Paris Agreement. So it's increasingly a legal issue. And as to ESG reporting being a reliable tool, you know, I'm not a fan of over-regulation, because I think you cannot create a perfect regulatory system that is so good that you don't need to be good yourself, you know, because you never know, as COVID has shown us, if and when the next crisis will hit. So I think it is a step in the right direction, but we really must be standing behind it. We need CEOs of integrity who want to lead in compliance with law, ethics, and values, who set the tone from the top to establish a culture of compliance within the organization, how people think, feel, and behave. And I think if everybody wants to do the right thing and is committed to be really behind it, we can make this work. As to the regulation we're currently seeing, we have, especially in the European Union, a huge amount of ESG disclosure regulation, but we are still lacking on the enforcement side there. But it's a long road. But again, I prefer, you know, corporations with leaders at the top who want to do the right thing, rather than people just going about it as some kind of tick the box exercise.
All right. Andrew, would you agree with what Timo said there, or do you share those views?
Yes, I do. I mean, it's interesting looking at that feedback. I think it is varied, and that's because sometimes ESG reporting is not necessarily as trusted as it should be. I think the fact is we need ESG reporting because it's the foundation upon which, you know, certainly in the banking environment, we need to gather data on our clients. So yes, I think it is important, but I think the manner of reporting and the requirements for reporting need to develop, and they will develop. They have to develop. As I said, it's going to be critical. But I think in addition to reporting, you know, reporting is not the only tool in helping us to move towards, you know, net zero goals. ESG reporting is just one element. There are various other elements that need to be factored into account, and they go sort of hand in hand with ESG reporting. I mean, you think about things like credit risk model changes that need to happen within institutions, particularly in banks, internal climate impact risk weightings on clients, the increased use of long-term forward-looking stress testing, climate risk assessments, and transition risk measurement tools that effectively measure transition plans that clients need to evidence in order to continue to receive you know, the financing they need from banks. There's also the need to collect climate-related data from clients at the onboarding stage, not just at the credit stage. There's the introduction of internal scoring methods that have to change relating to climate mitigation and climate adaptation, as well as the more transparent disclosure measures that are coming through from a regulatory perspective. So if you take all of that and put it all together, you know, that adds on to this whole concept of reporting. And I think reporting is just one element, but it is an important element. So I was just trying to sort of cast the whole point to focus on the wider aspects of what is contributing towards being able to do proper assessments on clients. And I'm talking purely from a point of view of banks facing off against clients, and that would be both at the corporate and primarily at the corporate level. So I hope that sort of gives you a sense that it's kind of wider than just reporting.
Yeah. Belinda, do you agree with that? ESG, yes, reporting good, but there needs to be more.
More is probably the wrong word. I think that
Wrong word.
I agree. I think we've all kind of noted that it's in its infancy, the development of reporting at the moment. So then there are different buckets as well. So what does reporting mean? I think it depends on what you are reporting, to who, and why. So we can be reporting as a corporate organization. They've got to report on their risk. So financial risk, so the impact of climate change and other ESG elements on that entity as a whole. And they're reporting that to people who are interested in maybe investing in that organization, whether they're shareholders or it could even be somebody that simply wants to go and use that organization or not. So there's an element of transparency about reporting. Then there is the risk element side of it. So actually reporting, if you're a regulated entity, we have to report on our own risk assessment. And that's very critical because it makes us go through that process. So what is the impact of climate risks, ESG risks on an entity, a global entity like ours? That's an extraordinarily difficult thing to do, but it's very important to risk assess every dollar that goes out the door so that we are a stable financial institution going forward. And then you've got transparency reporting, which is about products. And the end goal is to try and get a sort of a pincer attack on the finances, I think, to move them towards the transition towards a net zero. And if you can get the consumers, give them enough information so they can vote with their feet about where they put their dollar, their yen, their pound, their whatever their money is, into a pension fund or whatever they are purchasing, then that's the transparency and reporting that will also enable financial change. And at the other end, and for creating that obligation on financial institutions to risk assess and on their clients to risk assess means that we can make educated financing solutions in an effort to achieve net zero. So is it to be trusted and reliable? Well, not at this stage, but it's still being developed, but it's absolutely critical. And in order for that to become trusted and reliable, we need to have standardization in such things as carbon accounting measures and in the taxonomies of what is green, what's dark green, what is color washing, what is greenwashing. So I think it's a tool that we need, and it must become reliable and trusted.
Great, perfect. Thank you, Belinda. So I think let's move on and have a look at the results of our survey when we asked a few questions about net zero as an opportunity for growth. So one of the questions was, how confident are you that net zero policies can lead to financial opportunities not available today? So quite interesting with this one is that you can see all the blue dots are very much clustered sort of in the top half of the graph, but nevertheless, it's not everyone seems that confident that in fact that it can lead to financial opportunities and growth. So still relatively varied responses there. Who should we start with now? Maybe Andrew, would you like to kind of respond to that?
Yeah, they are varied, but I think, I think they are required, but they've, I think the point is that this is not only necessary, it will become the way of doing business. So the sooner there is engagement, the greater chance of longevity of business models. So I think it will lead to enhanced business models. I think the net zero approach is a requirement, really, and it's a duty, and it's not a nice to have. We have to do it, and the related growth opportunities will emerge as the industry and clients evolve to sort of a new business model. So I think it's kind of a defensive approach. You have to embrace it because it's the right thing to do. So it's necessary, but it will become the way of doing business.
Okay, Timo or Belinda, how confident are you about this?
Go ahead, Timo.
Please, Belinda.
Okay, we'll play table tennis for that one. I think well, net zero policies, again, let's define what we mean by that. It might mean different things to different people. There are government policies, and then there are institutional policies. People are coming out, they're saying, we're going to be net zero by a certain date. This is our strategy to achieve that. These are disclosures which are being made publicly, and they are what I would call the sort of the internal corporate policies. That's would apply to the institution I work for, but also to an awful lot of our clients. Let's deal with that as opposed to sort of the government policies for moving towards net zero, which I sincerely hope they'll deal with in Glasgow over the next week or so. Financial opportunities not available today. We're not going to just go net zero, right? And the critical bit of that is net. All right. So what's very important is to abate first, and then you have to net off the rest. And what does net mean? In order to net, you need to be able to offset. And there are various mechanisms for offsetting, and some of these are in development, but there's the voluntary carbon offset market, which isn't new, right? That's been around for 20 years or so, but now there's an awful lot of focus, a magnifying glass on that particular market for facilitating the progress towards net zero. As I said, it's got to balance off abatement first. Financial opportunities, well, there are going to be opportunities and losses, and it's about getting a balance there to make sure that we see the opportunities and we take advantage of those. In the transition, and that's what we really got to look at, I think, in focus, the transition to net zero requires financing to go into all the methods for capturing and abating carbon. And yes, there are huge opportunities there. There are opportunities in tech, R&D. There are opportunities in financing that. There are, I mean, just look at what's going on around, like for things like electric cars. There's a new paradigm, and the way that we run our society has got to run on a new paradigm. And that comes with opportunity. There are going to be some losers, and there are going to be some people who see those opportunities and take advantage of them. So yes, I think actually it's a very exciting time.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I fully agree with what Belinda has said. Cynics may say that some people will only care about climate change if they can make a profit from it. And there are, boundless opportunities. We've seen entire industries of producing electric cars. Their stock prices is skyrocketing. More valuable than other companies, put together. And this is, just one example. People still need to go from A to B. People still want to cling on to their comfortable lifestyles, which they have enjoyed to appreciate over the last decades. But they want to do so in a clean way. And if there are players that can enable them to maintain the status quo, but also saving, the environment, these companies will be clear winners of this climate change problem. It is a global problem, and therefore it needs global solutions, and it also needs to have uniform rules, which is very important, so that everybody is playing along to the same regulations. This is, of course, an utopian view of international law and certain countries' willingness to abide by international treaties. But I do think it is necessary to create a level playing field on a larger scale. But having said that, those industries that would take into views the views of the customers first and design their products accordingly, by giving the customers what they want. This is, I think, something that will be helpful in this respect, and I think there is a huge opportunity for growth for many industries.
Great. Okay, I think it would be great to have a bit of time for a Q&A session, because quite a lot of questions have been coming in. So let's maybe move on to our last sort of block of discussion. So two more questions that we asked in relation to sort of more net zero and corporate finances in general was, how big of an impact do you think net zero policies in their current form to have on the finances of your company? With this one, again, looking at the graph, really the responses were quite varied. So probably I think what we can sort of take away from this particular survey questions and the responses is that it's probably something that each GC sort of has to go off and research independently for his or her own company. But I'd quite like to look at this sort of last question that we addressed to everyone as well, which was, do you believe that net zero policies are at odds with corporate finances? So this was the kind of final big question there. And looking at the graph, again, very, very scattered all over the place. But most interestingly, if you can see that there, it was actually the question where we received the most ones and twos at the bottom of the graph. So actually quite a number of people did in fact think that yes, net zero policies are extremely or totally at odds with corporate finances. Belinda, are you equally concerned about this, or what's your view?
No, not at all. I think that it's define what the question means, I suppose, to me. Are they at odds with corporate finances? I think it means that does net zero policy, will it have a negative impact on a corporate's finances? Sort of see answer to last question. I think there are huge opportunities, but what is important that we do now is assess the impact so that we can adapt and mitigate, so that we are resilient to the effects of climate change, and so that we can facilitate the transition through putting financing into the right places. So net zero policies, our own net zero policies, no, I don't think so. We do have a very public policy. We've got a TCFD report. I think we were one of the first institutions to do one of those voluntarily. And we've recently published a new one in which we do have a strategy for reaching net zero. Is that at odds with us as a global financial institution that wants to survive well into the next century, hopefully? No, I think it's actually all about looking at the future and seeing what our clients will need and want, and providing that as a service. I'm not being facetious, but as a financial institution, obviously everything that we do has a client at its core. So our net zero policies have got to be has got to reflect what our clients also want. And clients are out there having their own net zero policies. So we've all got to work in tandem. And so I don't think it's at odds, no.
Andrew, Timo, I'll leave it up to you who wants to respond to this one.
Yeah, I'd agree as well. I mean, look, we have a duty, as I said, to engage, and we certainly don't think it's at odds. In fact, it fits very well with our purpose as an organization. But I think banks generally have a duty to nudge clients and governments in their markets towards achieving this goal. You know, if you take my institution, for example, we're in 59 markets globally, but only 33 of those markets have committed to net zero. You know, we as an institution have to help nudge clients in those markets and governments in those markets to see the light and to move the dial in relation to achieving very stretching targets. It's not easy because it requires a just transition. And that basically means you need to do something that is the right thing to do, but in a way that is gradual and as a transition, without shutting down clients from access to finance. So it's certainly not at odds with the corporate purpose of most institutions that are, I think, on this call. And the key to net zero, quite frankly, is finance, and finance at scale. And I think the private sector has a huge role to play in assisting clients and governments to achieve what is a very stretching target. Yeah, I think it's necessary and it's a duty, as I've said. So I agree with Belinda.
I absolutely agree with both Belinda and Andrew. You know, Kermit the Frog has rightfully sung, it isn't easy to be green, but you know, this is a chance for financial institutions in particular to step up and help their global client base towards a green transition. So banks can clearly show they are not part of the problem, but part of the solution. And this is actually a great chance for financial institutions these days.
Great. Perfect. What a good place to wrap up. Just so we can actually get a few questions from the audience in. I'm going to pass over to Adam now, and he will be handling our Q&A session.
Right. And you'll be pleased to know that we did show our COVID passes before we moved in, so it's okay that we're sharing the headsets. So that was fantastic. Thank you so much. You got through that because we've got a lot going on in the background here, so it's great to go through that. And there's still definitely time for people to put questions in. You can put them into the chat function or the Q&A function. But we've got a particularly good one here from Alberto Nino, who's the General Counsel of the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. And Alberto asks, should lawyers be more proactive on self-regulation, i.e. adoption of internal policies, codes of conduct, etc., and verification towards net zero before the actual regulators overdo it? So in a sense, should the lawyers get ahead of the game? Well, we finished off with Timo there. We'll start again with Timo. Timo.
Thank you so much, Adam. You know, thank you, Alberto. Muchas gracias. It's a great question. Actually, you know, do something first so you avoid something done to you later. It reminds me of the school when you were raising the arm to read the homework to the teacher, just not to get picked in the next lesson for your homework. I mean, I don't know if that works with the modern day regulator. We have some laws as the Financial Choice Act in the US, where good behavior is actually rewarded by the regulator, who then takes a step back in the monitoring of the company. But I think what we need is a dialogue with the regulator, and we need expressly to be sure about what we do as an organization. We need to liaise with all responsible stakeholders, the business, legal, compliance, if we create a rule, because you know, every rule that we set for ourselves is another item in the corporate process, which may already be quite bureaucratic. And then we need to strike the right chord. So I think rather than anticipating regulation that might hit us and then creating an advanced best-in-class code of conduct, we need to reach out and speak to other players. We need to speak to the regulator. We need to have a look at the picture, take a global view, and then decide what we will implement into our organization. Because I think if you prematurely implement guidelines, rules, and code of conduct, that may be causing hindrances to the business, even they are caused by good intentions. So you need to work closely, I would think, with the regulator on this.
Great, okay. And so Belinda, what would your view be?
Well, so taking preemptive strikes before we get forced to do something is something which some jurisdictions are already doing. I think it depends on the jurisdiction, actually. So the EU is particularly fond of legislation, and some members of the EU are fonder of legislation than other members. Whereas I think in Australia, for example, corporates are getting together to try and implement their own voluntary system. We've got the TCFD. A lot of organizations have produced their own voluntary TCFD report. For example, in the US, there's been no implementation of further sort of Basel reporting on climate change, but the information is that you've already got a framework. Go and use the framework you've got, or we will have to put in a new framework for you. The difficulty with legislation is creating a global standard, because different jurisdictions will create a different implementation. Good luck with finding legislation that works in everywhere. So should lawyers, particularly in global organizations, try and create a coherent attitude towards ESG, impact assessment, and the way that we implement our own internal policies? Yes, I think that's a very good idea. Making sure that you don't have a dissonance. It would be very difficult in a global organization to have one standard, for example, in EMEA, and a completely different one in Asia or in the US. So creating coordination maybe that actually we've got to sort of sing to the place where the legislation is the strictest. I think we shouldn't wait for governments to put in place legislation. If we do that, we'll be waiting a very long time. The Paris Agreement's been in place since 2016. It's quite a long time. We're at COP number whatever, and we still don't have government legislation to implement the path towards net zero. So yes, absolutely, we should be making our own initiatives towards that. Whether it's the lawyers who are doing it or just corporates, you know.
That's great, and I think it's one of the reasons why actually we set up Lawyers for Net Zero, is actually because there is a narrative in society that in society we've got to wait for the politicians before we can do anything. And then actually, even within businesses, we need to kind of like wait for the sustainability team to tell us what to do. And actually, there's lots of people in organizations in the society who have a lot of influence. And in-house lawyers have particularly kind of unique position in their organization to influence and champion net zero, as well as doing some of the kind of like more practical activities, such as working on contracts, etc., and making sure they're climate friendly. Actually, what we'll do is we'll go to the next question because I'm aware of time. And actually, I'll ask this one to Andrew. So Andrew, interesting one here, because somebody that I will try and pronounce the name of, Ayunke Ayoko, probably got that wrong, I apologize, asked the question, what should be the approach for general counsel in Africa or anywhere that's not as advanced on net zero emissions, where in Africa, net zero is more distant than in, say, some of the developed Western counterparts? So question to Andrew.
Yeah, thanks. To be honest, it goes to the first debate we were just having around adopting an approach, a benchmark, and then setting your own standard of a benchmark that you may choose as an organization and applying that. Because let's be frank, in the market of, let's say, sustainable finance, we have principles, we have no standard approach to how to document sustainable finance in this industry at the moment. Europe has a very different model to doing this to Asia, for example, and it's a bit all over the place. So organizations have to set themselves a benchmark to apply a set of standards that they agree on would apply to their organization. And whether it's in the context of the capital market space, or in the context of the lending space, or the financial market space, or the transaction banking space in the trade world, there are no standards that we can apply. There may be some principles, but it requires what lawyers should be doing is interacting with industry bodies and pointing to other developing principles and standards that are emerging globally. For example, as Belinda pointed out, in the European Union that has developed standards ahead of most jurisdictions, but various others are emerging with a range of legislation, including the UK, China, and many parts of Asia. And some parts of Africa are starting to look at this. And one suggestion, for example, that has been made and is really a credible suggestion is that in the context of taxonomy developments, we shouldn't be having taxonomy development at a country by country level. We should be having taxonomy development at a regional, in this case, African Union level, or a European Union level, as we've done in Europe, in order to try and achieve a consistency of standards so that organizations are not jumping from standard to standard as they do cross-border transactions across markets. So in the context of Africa, I would say to look to other developing and developed markets that have produced standards, and then to work with industry bodies to use those as guides.
Great stuff. Good, great answer. And what we'll do is actually, because we've got some great questions coming in, and what I want to do is actually, I'm going to take chair's rights and answer one of the questions myself, which is a question from Pablo Nunez in Latin America, which is, does the future belong to environmental lawyers, considering policies and products are increasingly centered around net zero and eco-friendly notions? Now, on the surface, you'd think, yes. And what I'd actually say is, yes, and what it is that we can make it so that whatever sort of lawyer you are, you can be acting for net zero. That's why we are lawyers for net zero, and why I was particularly delighted that Belinda, Timo, and Andrew are joining us. And as far as I'm aware, none of them are actually specialist environmental lawyers, but they've over time kind of increased their knowledge and their interest and also personal passion regarding this. And so Lawyers for Net Zero, our intention is to effectively democratize the ability for any lawyer, whether they're in-house or private practice, if obviously they want to. At the moment, we are only working with in-house, to be able to take action on net zero, because actually there's a lot of things that in-house lawyers can do which are particularly important, and it's still really important to get some good expertise and knowledge around environment. So if you are an environmental lawyer or trained in it, great, that means you've got even more power. But I want to ask one final question, again, chair's rights, which isn't one that's come in, but I'd be interested to see what people think would be a good outcome from COP26, particularly in light of the fact that we're on Finance Day today. We had Rishi Sunak speak this morning. So I don't necessarily expect you to comment upon what has been said. If you want to do, you can. But also particularly maybe what would be valuable to be agreed by the end of this. So maybe we'll go to Belinda for that.
Well, the single thing I would say was the rule book for implementation of the carbon markets. I think that that's critical for achievement of net zero. Again, think about the word net.
Great. Okay. And then maybe if we can do the same thing, can we have like one quick thing from Timo that you'd like to see coming out of COP26?
Well, I think, first of all, it's important many people did show up. Most importantly, the US rejoined again the Paris Agreement. So some major players as China, also Brazil, unfortunately, where I'm right now, and then Russia didn't show. But I think that, if people make firm commitments to reinforce what has been agreed, to give real life to the Paris Agreement, to show that this is being seriously, and they set standards they hold themselves accountable for in the future, make firm commitments against which they can be measured. That would be like the ideal outcome, and it would also be something that you could show to the younger generations, activists who still think this is a senseless event. But in the end, I think this would be as good as it gets to reinforce what has been said, in the Paris Agreement, make establish real standards and hold yourself accountable to them, and closely monitor the process in the future.
Great. And then finally, Andrew, and I'm going to ask you an additional question, Andrew, and you're going to be the last speaker for the panelists, is answer the kind of quick sort of what you'd like to see. And also, what will be your final top tip for any of the in-house counsel out there thinking about how they could shape net zero policies within their organization? So you've got a couple of quick questions there.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. Well, it's very simple for me. I'd agree with Belinda. Article 6 needs to be resolved at COP26 so that it makes Paris effective and will effectively open the carbon market. So that is very fundamental. I think there will be a failure of COP26 if Article 6 does not succeed, in particular Article 6.4, but you can go and read all about Article 6, and I won't go on about that now. However, to answer your second question, I think lawyers play a critical role, both from a strategic perspective and strategy, in leaning in to help shape the net zero strategy of organizations. as well as looking at the communications and disclosure aspects that corporates and institutions are coming out with. There's the risk and governance aspect that lawyers can play a critical role in. The role of legal in identifying essentially the rules of the road for your organization. And then, of course, the transactional, the operational, and the sort of behavioral change that we need to see in order to meet the net zero commitments that institutions have come out with. And I would say one final point, it's not about making a commitment to net zero. It's about making a plan that is credible and that can be tested over time relating to net zero. So those are the key points I'd leave you with in relation to how lawyers can assist in relation to net zero.
That's perfect, thank you. And so we're now coming to the end here. Well, I think I can just do it to the screen. What I would like to invite any in-house lawyer out there who's interested in taking more action, and as I said, you don't need to have any environmental training, is to explore how you could start to take some actions around net zero. What we'd encourage is actually start off small, ask a few questions, take some action. Andrew here has become a Lawyers for Net Zero champion. He's a great example of that leadership that's required. But leadership doesn't have to mean that you're the CEO or you're the Prime Minister. You can be taking action at whatever level you are, even if you're a newly qualified or whether you're a very high status. And how we help Lawyers for Net Zero to do that is via our work, so that we convene a community. This is part of that convening of the community. We give some guidance to the people that join our community through our net zero action principles, which are basically common sense for in-house lawyers. And then what the most important thing that we do is we help support you to generate momentum. And how we do that is through basically a very good technology, which is human beings. So we have a group coaching process called Action Learning Groups. And what they do is enable in-house counsel to do peer-to-peer learning and have some accountability with each other, where in a kind of Chatham House rule conversation, you're all kind of communicating in small groups about how you can take progress. And through that can help you be part of the climate solution. So I'll now hand over back to Anna to finish off our conversation here.
Thank you very much, Adam. So basically just a very quick thank you to everyone for staying tuned for the entire conversation today. Unfortunately, we will have to call it quits here just because of time constraints, but I think we will have to definitely follow up, particularly post COP26, because I think there's still a lot of very interesting discussion points to be talked about here. But thank you very much to the panelists for sharing all your really interesting views today. Thank you again for Adam, obviously, for making it happen that we can actually be here live at COP26 today. And final last little plug also for the Legal 500 Green Guide. As mentioned earlier, we did launch the Green Guide Hub yesterday. So you've got the web address here now, but again, you should also you'll be able to find it quite easily if you just go to the legal500.com. So do check that out if you are interested in reading a little bit more around this topic. I think that's all from us today.
One final thing for me, can we just stop? So obviously we've got the green guide that we are setting out there, but what I'd also like to offer is that you can connect with me or Lawyers for Net Zero via LinkedIn. So I think a lot of you got to know about this through LinkedIn, and I'd love to connect with anybody that is passionate or even just interested in how we can take action through the legal community to keep a livable planet for us all. So I want to thank Anna. I want to thank Fred behind the scenes for all the hard work he's done. And finally, thank you so much for Timo, Belinda, and Andrew for taking the time and being patient with us whilst we were having some technical issues, but I think we got there in the end. So thank you so much, and we'll all say goodbye now.
Thank you.
Thank you.